Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much to Mark Donfried and the organizing team for inviting me to this talk. I've got about 20 minutes. It's a half an hour slot, is it? Okay. I'll try and get through this in 20 minutes then. Okay, so I am a political philosopher, right? Sorry about that. We work with theory rather than practice. So you might find this all a bit abstract, I don't know, but in an attempt to try and make it more concrete than it might otherwise be, I've picked on one particular area of intercultural dialogue, namely pork. Okay, so there you've got a pig carved up according to, I think, those sort of American cuts. At least that's what it told me on the file when I looked on the internet and grabbed that image off there. Without regard to copyright, I must say, it's probably illegal for it to be on there. But anyway, I'm relying on you not to tell on me to whoever owns the image rights. Okay, so I'll start by talking about pork and then try and draw out some more general morals about relativism and toleration and how we all live together or don't live together satisfactorily. Okay, so there's a picture of a pig, a random pig, again, culled from the internet. Oh, right, sorry, there's a certain amount of this sort of animation mania. Right, there's a dead pig. And that already, okay, it's not very readable on my computer, but I think it's okay on the screen. So the first point I'd make is pork is actually a kind of cultural crossroads. Until you start thinking about it, you might think, well, okay, pork, yeah, what is there to say? But fairly obviously, and I know there are Muslims in the room, for example, there may be Jews as well. One of the significations that pork can have is as a meat which is unclean, not kosher, not halal, and so forth. And these are among the cultural responses that we make towards pork. One response to pork, of course, is just to eat it. A lot of people do that. I do that, okay, so I'm coming out as a pork eater. Doesn't mean I look askance on people who don't eat pork. You know, I'm very kind of liberal about that sort of thing. I think people have a human right not to eat pork if they don't want to eat pork. My mother doesn't eat pork, for example. I have friends who don't eat it. But that is one response to it. The bacon sandwich, that's one example. Okay, there's various, yes, okay, we've got various dishes here. So bacon sandwich, sweet and sour pork, andouillette, and the gammon steak. Okay, so those are different kind of cultural representations of pork and its culinary or gastronomic significance. I think I've got some more graphics, actually. The andouillette is a particularly interesting one. Anybody French here? Bonjour, bonjour. Fried andouillette? I never have. No? Yeah, it's nice. Some people think it tastes a bit kind of fecal because it's from the, you know, from the lower intestine or whatever of the pig. But anyway, I have seen people eating it. Okay. And we've got a bacon sandwich coming up somewhere. No, that's a gammon steak, and there's a bacon sandwich. Okay, so that's the gastronomic meaning or meanings of pork, right? It plays a fairly central role in some cultures, the US, for example. Hogs, pork barrels, I mean, it's entered the kind of common discourse. But as I've already indicated, there are other ways in which people engage with pork, less favorably disposed towards it, more favorably disposed towards the providers of pork, because obviously part of the deal with pork is basically that, I'm afraid, as the old English saying goes, with an English breakfast, which is egg and bacon, the hen makes a contribution, but the pig is fully committed. And, you know, you don't really get bacon without, sadly, the pig, well, dying, basically. So I've just given you a list there. Oops. Tend to fall over things when I'm doing these talks. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's a list of groups who are not so keen on pork for one reason or another. One is just vegetarians or vegans or fruitarians or nutarians, you know, all those sorts of people. You know, if you say I'm vegetarian but I eat pork, well, that kind of, you know, reduces the force of saying that you're a vegetarian a bit, doesn't it? I mean, some vegetarians are having to say, well, we eat fish, but really if it's pork that you're eating a bacon sandwich, you know, the extent to which you can plausibly claim to be a vegetarian is kind of reduced pretty drastically. On the other hand, as I've already said, is this okay? Because I'm aware that I keep coming over the PA sometimes and not others, depending on, is this needed for the recording, is it? Or, yeah, I see, okay, well, I'll keep holding it. Okay, so religious groups: Seventh-day Adventists, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, Rastafarians. That's a selection of people, different kind of religious faiths where people don't eat pork. Sometimes there are different gradations of strictness or of orthodoxy, but certainly core members of those groups, the last four, the bottom four on the list, the non-secular ones, you've got sort of two secular groups there, or potentially secular groups, and then you've got four religious groupings, and they tend not to like the idea of eating pork. So there's another dead pig. Okay, so on the face of it, you've got different attitudes already towards pork, and then there's a question about how we negotiate those, right? What do we do about the fact that people have different views on dead pig meat? Okay, here's a bit on scriptural prohibitions coming up, just to give you sort of chapter and verse, literally about that. Here we go. Graphic of a pig. So that is a quotation from the Bible, the Old Testament, a holy book for Jews and for Christians. I think that one is Leviticus. There is stuff in, that is to say, the third book of Moses, in Deuteronomy as well, which is the second book. And the swine, which is an old word for pig in English, because it divideth the hoof and cheweth the cud, it is unclean unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass. So the basis for the prohibition there is the fact that you've got a beast with a cloven hoof, a split hoof, that also doesn't chew the cud. Now, don't ask me why that means you can't eat the animal, because you then have to go off and talk to rabbis who will no doubt give you reasons why that is the case. But those are the formal conditions that have to be met for the non-eatability of the meat, right? The foot has to be split, as it is with pigs and cows, but also it doesn't chew the cud, doesn't ruminate in the way that cows do. So it's okay to eat beef, right? But it's not okay to eat pork because pigs don't ruminate. They just, get their troughs down and their snouts down into the trough and, guzzle, swill, or whatever they do. Okay, I don't think this is gonna work actually. There's a link there to a reggae song which I was gonna play you. You can note down the link if you really want to go to it. It's by somebody called Axelrod. It's basically an anti-pork reggae number. It's a bit of an undiscovered classic actually, I think. If you can't find it, then there's an email address for me at the end of the piece. You want to look it up. I mean, I strongly, recommend it to you. I'll just make sure it doesn't work. These things don't. Oh, well, it's there. But I'm not hooked up to the internet, so I think it'll take too long, sadly. Goes on for about 4 minutes, going on about how bad eating piggy wiggies is, and all sorts of bad things that will happen to you if you eat pork. So that's kind of Rastafarian take on pork, and then you have got Quranic prohibition there. He's only forbidden you dead meat and blood and flesh of swine, pigs again, and any food over which the name of other than Allah, God, has been invoked. But if one is forced by necessity without willful disobedience, then Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. So there's a bit more kind of flexibility there on the. There, you've got it. Tiklar versus Axelrod. Yeah, that's exactly it. Do you want to play it now? Well, yeah, okay. Well, we'll give it a minute. That's not the whole thing. Is that coming in?
Don't know what's on their mind, 'cause some of them are pork-eater, a piggy-wiggy. It's not their fault, that's the way that it is. A pork-eater,
Well, we started it. Okay. Thank you very much. Round of applause for this gentleman, please. Thank you. I didn't think you get to hear that, but there you are. So that is Tiklar and Axelrod, or Tiklar versus Axelrod. Didn't know of their existence before, so that's one benefit of doing this talk, that I've been tuned into them. Okay, So different kinds of scriptural prohibitions on pork. Okay, this is actually from, can't really read this. I put this in because it shows how, this is actually the comments thread from the YouTube video, which has just been played. So if you go down, you know, you've got the usual kind of comments. And it does show how the public sphere, as it now exists, and the public sphere is very importantly, you know, includes the internet now, as you know, how this can quickly polarize opinions about something as innocuous, perhaps seeming as pork. Right, somebody at the top, I won't read all of these, but says, the first one says, reading all these comments about eating pork is bad or eating pork is good. That's the problem with the world. No respect for each other. Bury your differences and get over it. Then somebody else says, for this Jamaican donkey, stay hating on us all. Proud pig eaters of the Pacific Islands. So that's somebody from Samoa or somewhere like that protesting about Rastafarian West Indians saying you shouldn't eat pork. Okay? Then somebody else comes underneath rather irrelevantly saying offensive is what Israel does to Palestine. Somebody else says I'm a vegetarian. WTF, I won't spell that out, is this shit. I'm Jew and find this offensive. So you quickly get the kind of comments escalating. Admittedly, these are sort of nutty people sitting in their bedrooms in Iowa or somewhere. Sorry? No, it's okay. Sorry, you were signaling. Okay. You know, but it is kind of indicative of how opinions differ, and you quickly get into a not very edifying slanging match between different people, depending on what cultural, political, religious, etc. perspectives they have on pig meat, on pork. Another quick one, which I got from a British newspaper, The Guardian, which some of you will know, the other day, although I think the case was at the end of, no, last year, sorry. So this guy, who was called Liam Ferrer, deposited a pig's head outside the home of a Muslim place of worship, basically. And again, obviously there is some symbolism in that. It's worth taking a step back to think how human beings, as I'll say in a moment in more detail, are symbol-using creatures. We generate symbols all the time. A different statement would have been made if, for example, this guy had, I don't know, deposited a dog's head even outside a Muslim place of worship. I mean, clearly what is being pointed at here is the Muslim prohibition on eating pork and so forth, and so making a sort of gratuitously offensive gesture is, on one view, and I think in British law now, a racially aggravated hate crime. I mean, obviously Muslims are not a race, but I mean, it falls under the category of non-discrimination legislation. Okay, so we have the problem of pork. There's a couple of pigs snouting away in the dirt. Okay, this gets a bit more serious now, but not very. As I've just said, we inhabit a sort of web of symbolic meanings which, if you want to put it in a sort of slightly pretentious way, mediate our interactions with other people, within cultures, but also between them. Okay, I mean, our interactions are symbolically mediated, most obviously by language. That is just an inescapable part of the human scene, seems to me. Secondly, if we focus in on pork, pork gets its meaning, as I hope I've illustrated, from the cultural contexts in which people act, whether those are religious, agricultural, gastronomic, culinary, whatever they may be. Okay, all of those different contexts within which pork is discussed and looked at. So, I mean, if you want the slide, I can make the slides available, send them to the conference site or to anybody who wants them. Okay. Okay, so you might think that, well, that's all okay, right? The pork question is not alike, for example, in the European elections. Pork has not been up there on the political agenda along with, I don't know, immigration, for example, or contributions between North and Southern Europe, questions like that. Okay, so, you know, it's all okay, isn't it? You might think. However, that is to a certain extent the case with pork, although I try to illustrate from the comments thread on the YouTube video it's not always the case. But of course, that doesn't mean that contextual demarcations, for example, between religion and civil society and politics, that those are always going to do the job of negotiating cultural differences for us in an effective way. However, some people, this would be a position that I would reject for reasons that I'll try and explain, think you should, okay, try easy. This is a saying of my mother's. It says, don't try hard, try easy. Right? You're trying hard to say, don't try hard anymore, just try. So as one of my friends said, I mean, it sounds a bit like a sort of commercial for a laxative. Don't try hard, you know, try easy. Okay. But this is one sort of view. Okay, this is how, on some, getting the first bullet point up there. So one response to these kinds of differences is to combine easy relativism with easy toleration. What does that mean? Okay, well, easy relativism first. On the easy relativism view, you might just say, well, there's no big truth of the matter out there about, for example, pork, right? It's not like sort of written in the stars that you should eat pork, or you can eat pork, or you shouldn't eat pork. There's just different opinions, right? You say tomato, I say tomato, you say potato, I say potato. And, you know, what the hell? You know, it's just differences, ways in which people are different. Hey, let's just bliss out. Have another spliff, not worry about it. That's one view. That gives rise to, or could give rise to, what you might call easy toleration. So given easy relativism, as I've just characterized it, or really caricatured it, there's no truth for anyone to enforce, and that just kind of pulls away one of the main traditional justifications for intolerance. Right? And we'll think of examples of this still today, but certainly historically, one of the motives for intolerance has certainly been that people thought they had the truth, for example, religious truth, right? And then they thought, well, because I've got the truth about God and the meaning of human life and our place in the universe, I'm therefore justified in enforcing my views at the point of a sword or burning people who happen to disagree with me or whatever it might be. So the thought then is, well, okay, if you get rid of that idea that, you know, there is an ultimate truth, then you get rid of one of the big sources of intolerance. Because then you say, well, you know, somebody who thinks they've got the ultimate truth has just got it wrong from the start because there wasn't an ultimate truth to get, right? Okay, what is wrong with that? Well, one of the things I think is wrong with it is that, at least in some areas, we don't think like that. We might think like that about pork, but what about this example, which I take from Jonathan Swift, the Irish writer of the 18th century, who wrote in English. And it's a book called A Modest Proposal. Anybody know that? Anybody familiar with that? Yeah. Oh, good. Right, you know him. Okay. You know Modest Proposal? Okay. I mean, it's not his most famous work, which is Gulliver's Travels, which you may well have come across in one form or another. But this is a satirical pamphlet he wrote in, I think, 1729, yes, where he suggests there was supposedly an overpopulation problem in Ireland at the time, too many babies being born. So Swift says, well, there's an easy solution to that. People are hungry at the moment. Let's just farm babies for food. Yes. So we take the same approach to human babies as pork eaters do towards pigs, right? There we are. There's one sitting in the pot there, just waiting to be garnished with some olive oil, a bit of oregano maybe on his head before you sort of tuck into him. So what is wrong with that, you might think? And in particular, what is the difference between that as a proposal? I mean, Swift was not being serious, right? But supposing we took this seriously. They're right, yeah, there are too many people. Let's eat some of them. Okay, I mean, you could do it in different ways, say run a lottery or something like that. What's the difference between eating pork and eating human meat? I mean, I don't know what it tastes like. It's supposed to taste a bit like pork. I won't ask anybody if they've eaten human meat. Assume that you or at least not knowingly. I've eaten some strange foods, some strange animals in my time, but I've never knowingly eaten human. Okay, so the usual name for that would be cannibalism. Right? Cannibals eat their own kind, so humans who eat other humans are cannibals. As one philosopher said, well, liberalism for liberals and cannibalism for cannibals. Let's be relativistic about these as well. I think that that idea is not seriously meant either. But there is then a question about the status of our fairly firm judgment that it's probably a bad idea to eat human babies, compared with the easy relativism and easy toleration position about pork. Right? So we just say, well, hey, let's just spliff out. Okay, you want to eat babies, I don't want to eat babies, but fine, you want to do it, go ahead. There's no ultimate truth here. That doesn't then look quite so appealing, at least to me. And if we have got strong views about this, then we sort of find ourselves wanting to reach for the notion of truth again, don't we? I mean, I'm saying this partly to be provocative. See what you say in the question and answers. I'm nearly finished. Okay, so we want to say here, this just repeats what I've already said. We want to say, well, yeah, but cannibals are just completely different from pork eaters, right? Cannibals are horrible. They're barbarous. Whereas here I am happily eating my pork steak or whatever. I'm not barbarous. I'm different from that. But, if somebody says, well, what is the difference, right? You've just got one sort of dead flesh you think is okay to eat, and there's another sort of dead flesh you don't think is okay to eat. What? Where does the argument go? So the cannibals might say, what's so bad? We're not making you eat human meat, right? We're not force-feeding you. You're going to eat this sort of lump of, thigh of, I don't know, French person or something. I'm going to force it down your throat. We're not saying that. We're just saying, hey, let's be liberal. You've got human flesh eaters on the one side. You've got non-human flesh eaters on the other side. We just coexist happily together. All we want to do is to be left in peace to each other. Right. What could possibly be wrong with that? I don't know what. There's going to be something else. Yeah? Oh, yes, there is. So just like pork eaters are left in peace to eat pork, so pork dodgers are free to avoid eating it. Same goes for eating human. Don't have to do it. Can do it if you want to. It's recreational exercise. Okay, but, sorry, this is a stupid pun. Because it came up on the Wiki Images site, so I thought, well, I'll stick it in there. It's a cheap joke. But anyway, okay. So why what we want to say doesn't necessarily cut it. So that's the sort of the ending of this story about pork and human flesh eating. Easy relativism and easy toleration may work as long as we don't care too much about the issue. So perhaps we don't care very much about pigs. Nice, furry animals, but on the other hand, we're quite happy to go to most people are, go to a supermarket where there are lumps of dead pig dotting the shelves, without feeling kind of moral abhorrence or something like that. So, is that toleration? Do we tolerate each other, or do we just not really care? We're just apathetic. But toleration seems to be something sort of more morally ennobled than mere apathy. Right? It's an ideal in itself. It's not, I just don't care what you do, just get on with it. I mean, that's a different kind of attitude, you might think, from toleration. On the other hand, once we caring, we do start caring, scrambled up. Once we do start caring about things like eating babies, we then start to think, well, no, this shouldn't be tolerated, right? This is really too horrible. So the cannibals' kind of liberal solution where, they get to eat human and we can, not eat human if we want to, we think, well, no, that's not going to do it, right? Because we think it's intolerable, right? We've accessed the moral truth about this, and we want to stop people doing it. We shouldn't tolerate it. And that seems like a sort of paradox, and this is where it ends up, the argument ends up, really, which I'm going to leave unresolved for you. I'll just leave for you to chew over. That's not an inappropriate way of putting it. So there's a couple of extra drawings, in what follows. So it looks like toleration disappears down the crack. as it were. The crack between, on the one hand, not really caring very much and just being apathetic. So we let people get on with it. And a lot of people, a lot of young people now, homosexuality is a good illustration of this process. They just don't think there's any big deal about it, right? No longer care about it. It's like caring about, what colour socks you wear. Okay, you're wearing green socks today, fine. Next subject. So there's apathy. And then on the other hand, there is caring so much that you think, well, this thing is so important, I really can't put up with somebody having a different view or a different view being enforced politically. For example, by letting people. Okay, I'll just put the conclusion up on the screens. There, I won't read them out. I'll just leave them up there for you to go because I've gone over time. Oh, no, come back. Oh, that was me, sorry. Okay, this is the last. I'll put it back in a moment. This is the last slide. Okay, that's me. Thank you. There's comments. Welcome on that email address, which I'll put back up afterwards, but I'll put the conclusions back up on the screen in front of you if you want. Okay, thank you.